Hi everyone, my name is Sriteja, and today I have the pleasure of talking with Professor Christopher Gardner and Dr. Justin Sonnenberg, and I'll be asking them a few questions, and hopefully you guys learn a lot. So thank you so much, Professor Gardner and Dr. Sonnenberg.
Great to be with you.
Yeah, so the first thing I just wanted to get to is I know you do a lot of research with the microbiome, and you do a lot of research with nutrition, and so I just wanted to know what do you guys eat on a daily basis? That was my first question that I had.
Go ahead.
So because of him, one of my favorite breakfasts was avocado toast, which doesn't that sound normal? Lots of people. I have avocado toast with kimchi. Oh. So that's what I had for breakfast this morning. So I got my vegetable and my fermented food in there. And when I go back for lunch, I'm probably going to have a salad. I have lots of salads, but my salads are full of stuff. I've got nuts and figs in it, and I've got beans, and I've got avocado. It's sort of a high-fat, high-protein salad. And I drink kombucha because now I'm probably on my 200th batch of kombucha. Oh. So salad's a pretty regular thing for me, and then maybe I made a lentil chestnut soup the other day for dinner, so maybe that'll be dinner tonight.
Nice.
My mouth's watering, so
yes,
let me compose myself. And then, so a lot of my diet has actually been affected by Christopher, of course, because, I think we kind of know the tenets of feeding a microbiome. We need a lot of dietary fiber. I think a lot of people think about eating their vegetables as eating their vegetables, where it's something they do for health and maybe not something that's so pleasant. And Christopher has this wonderful idea that's kind of from his field in the conferences he goes to, where you just make healthy food super delicious. And if you pay attention to recipes that he makes, you can take things like whole grains and lentils and all sorts of legumes and combine them with vegetables and nuts, and then wonderful other tastes like vinegars and healthy oils and things like that, create these amazing salads. So my family really eats a lot of concoctions that there's no recipe for. We just will make a whole grain or make a legume, throw in veggies, throw in nuts, make some dressing for it, and that's our dinner. So that's quite often what we do. And then I do have, actually I had avocado toast this morning, but I had sauerkraut on it instead of kimchi, which was delicious.
Nice. Well, that's making my mouth water. So for dinner, I'm going to try and not use any recipes. So just free ball it.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Great.
Another question that I had was, you talked about kombucha, Professor Gardner. I drink a lot of kombucha, but I fear that whenever I look for kombuchas in the supermarket, I feel like most of them have a lot of sugar. So do you think that the benefits of kombucha outweigh the sugar content, or how do you think I should go about buying kombucha, or what do you suggest?
Well, so one issue is, the U.S. is really very always focusing on labels, and so you can look at the labels and they differ by sugar tremendously. So all I got to do is be careful per serving. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it'll be a bottle of kombucha. It'll say how many grams of sugar, but it says the bottle is 2 servings. Mm-hmm. And you really are going to drink the whole bottle. So make sure you know how many servings, and then look at grams of sugar. And I found a huge difference in the ones that get sold in the store. So if sugar is a concern, you can find one with less sugar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I agree, reading labels and making sure that you're not, yogurt, this is a big problem too. If you eat flavored yogurts, quite often they'll throw in just, the same amount of sugar per volume that you'd see in a soda. So you really have to be careful of that. I do recommend, Christopher got me into making my own kombucha, and if you let this kind of sit for a long period of time, you can really drive the sugar content very low. It turns out to be very kind of sour tasting, so it's a flavor probably a lot of people would have to get used to, but wonderfully healthy and low glycemic index.
Mm-hmm, yeah. We're talking about sugar, but on the other hand of the spectrum is artificial sweeteners. So, Dr. Sonnenberg, what are the effects of artificial sweeteners on the microbiome? And Professor Gardner, are there any other effects of artificial sweeteners on the body, especially when you eat more artificial sweeteners than you eat sugar? So Do you guys want to talk about that?
You start.
Yeah, so for the microbiome, we know that artificial sweeteners are really a big problem. There's been beautiful research done in our field that show that different classes of artificial sweeteners can have a negative impact on the microbiome, change the composition, and result in a community of microbes that actually has negative metabolic effects. So is more likely to make your blood glucose spike or to have aberrant insulin responses. So something like prediabetes. And so sugar is not great for you, but artificial sweeteners are also really bad for your microbiome.
So let me add to that. Usually, I think anything that has artificial sweetener is junk because it was supposed to have sugar in it, and it was a cookie or it was a dessert, and now it's healthy because now it doesn't have sugar. It's still a cookie or it's still junk. But I'm really curious about the microbiome and artificial sugars or sugar substitutes. There's lots of names for them. So interestingly, one of the artificial sugars or sugar substitutes is aspartame. It's 2 amino acids. And all the artificial sweeteners are about 200 to 600 times the sweet as sugar. So you know the people who put them in the packages in coffee, like the pink and yellow and blue?
Yeah.
It's mostly filler. Like it's an insanely small amount of aspartame or sucralose or saccharin. And they all have kind of funny stories how they were all discovered. They're almost all discovered by accident, by bad lab practices. People would be doing something in the lab and they'd turn oh my God, what was that? Oh, I just touched this thing. Like they're really weird. Do you know what sucralose is? It's a sugar molecule with 3 chlorine atoms on it. Nobody would have thought, wonder if I took a glucose molecule and put some chlorine, maybe I'll just throw it in the swimming pool here. No, it was discovered by mistake. So I would think sucralose with a sugar molecule and chlorine on it would have a different impact on the microbiome than phenylalanine and alanine, which is what aspartame is, just 2 amino acids. Stevia is different than that. Saccharin is different than that. So I think throwing all the sugar substitutes in is saying artificial sweeteners have a negative impact on the microbiome. I have a feeling it's a little more nuanced than that.
Completely, and I think that that's one of the big questions in the field. There's one beautiful study that looked at 3 different classes of artificial sweeteners, and they saw very similar effects, even though all these molecules were very different from one another. And, I think it speaks to how little we understand that's occurring between components of our diet or what we put in our mouth and how those things impact our microbiome. The one thing that I will say is that we do have taste receptors in our gut. Most people think our taste receptors are only in our mouth. And so one possible mechanism that would tie together all these different classes of molecules is if they were acting on the microbiome through a host receptor that was affecting, for instance, the immune system or something like that. But I agree that it's a big caper. How would all these different types of molecules and very different and low dosages do this? So still something we have to figure out.
But in the end, it's all crap. Everything that has it's not a carrot. It's not broccoli. It's not sauerkraut. It's not kimchi. So that part always, I kind of revert back to that. Why? And my funniest story is a friend I gave my SCOBY to, and they were concerned about sugar, so they went to make their kombucha with sucralose. And it somehow didn't work because the microbes don't eat sucralose. They eat sugar, so that didn't work at all for them, even though they had good intention.
Thank goodness. I mean, if our microbes were consuming the sucralose,
that would be bad.
Yeah.
Another follow-up to that, like, let's say, I know a lot of teenagers my age, they eat artificial sweeteners thinking that they're good. But a concern that I have, and maybe it speaks to other people too, let's say I'm trying to lose weight myself, and I have a choice between sugar or artificial sweeteners. When you guys talked about how artificial sweeteners are this much substitutes for a whole spoonful of sugar, do you think it's logical that people choose artificial sweeteners in hopes of not eating sugar and losing more weight?
Yeah, I think that's a very difficult question, and I think you can certainly understand the difficult position people are in trying to choose these things. I'll be curious to hear what the very knowledgeable person about diet and health has to say here. But, I think when I started figuring out in my own life kind of the detriments of sugar on health and the importance of things like dietary fiber and supporting the gut microbiome, I tried to change my carbohydrates that I was consuming from simple carbohydrates, things like sugar, to more complex carbohydrates, things like dietary fiber. And I went through probably a 6 to 12 month period where it was really miserable. I felt like I had these major cravings. I wanted like muffins and cookies in the afternoon, just kind of like there's this habit that you form and almost like an addictive sort of feeling that you get if you don't get that kind of sugar feedback from the food you're eating. But once you make it through the portal and you come out the other side, that sugary food really does not sit well. It doesn't taste good. It makes you feel bad and you don't crave it as much. And so we are wired to want very sweet foods, but I think that there's something that's happened, particularly in the United States, but all over in kind of westernized or westernizing countries, where the food industry just keeps on putting more and more sugar into things to hit this bliss point, and they get us conditioned to want very sugary food. And I think that if you can get yourself to fight against that and develop cravings of things like fermented foods, which also have kind of addictive properties, but they're healthy, you'll be in much better shape.
Mm-hmm. So I kind of have two answers to this, building off what you were just saying. There's a lot of people who have gone through a sugar challenge, and they've just said, for a week, I'm not going to have any sugar. And it's like, I can't do this. I'm addicted. And after several days, it actually goes away. You can actually control this addiction if you avoid it. But then a lot of people say, okay, so now I'm just going to have one cookie. And it comes back with a vengeance. Yeah. So if you don't stick to sort of a strict avoidance, it's really not that bad, but it comes raging back at you, and then you're addicted to it all over again. So yes, you can do it, but boy, you have to stick with it. Separate from that, so I'm that chair of the American Heart Association's Nutrition Committee and was assigned to write a review of artificial sugars, sugar substitutes. And the key word here is compensation. So if you were going to have a diet soda versus a regular soda, at that meal, you definitely ate fewer calories and less sugar because one was diet soda and one was regular soda. There's a physiological and a psychological response to that. And the psychological one is later that day at dinner, you weren't going to have a dessert, but you think, I was so good at lunch. Wow, I am so proud of myself. I wasn't going to have dessert, but now I am. And you nullify that benefit that you had early, so you compensate. And the other compensation is physiological. Your body tasted sweet. It thought it was getting calories. And no calories came. And so something in your body kicks in and says, I was robbed of calories, and now I want more later in the day. So the studies that get done to see if those sugar substitutes are effective or not need to go for the rest of the day, even the next day. And quite a few of them find that people compensate for what they achieved. They really did in that moment cut back on sugar and calories. But over the course of a day or two, it's often nullified by compensation.
So it's not only what happens to your body, it's about your behavior and like how you go about your daily life.
Psychological and physiological. Yep.
That's really interesting. Thank you so much. Like on that note of like really interesting like subjects and topics, are there any other surprising facts about the microbiome or nutrition that like someone like me, a teenager like me, wouldn't know?
No, that's your field. That's
okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of fun facts about the GI tract and the microbiome that we like to tell people. So one of them is that if you take your digestive tract, you think about this kind of tube that goes through your body. It actually has a huge surface area because of all these little structures to increase absorptive capacity. If you were to stretch that surface area out of your mucosal GI surface flat, it would be the size of a tennis court. So just a massive, massive structure, surface area inside of you, the biggest surface area in contact with the outside world in our body. And living within that are at least as many and probably more bacterial cells than human cells in our body. So by cell number, Teja, you are more microbial than you are human. So you can start to think about yourself as a microbe that carries around some human cells. These microbes have this incredible composite genome we call the metagenome. In our human genome, we have on the order of 20,000 to 25,000 different genes. In our microbiome, we have on the order of 3 to 5 million different genes. So just this massive number of genes. We don't know what most of them do yet, but we're learning over time, and there's a lot of exciting stuff in there.
Wow.
What he said.
I can just imagine like a tennis court just like all wrapped up into like,
exactly.
That's really cool. Yeah.
Or when you buy these microbial products, the fermented food type things, and they tell you how many CFUs are in them. Have you ever seen that? So if you buy something that's fermented, and CFUs, colony forming units, it'll say a teaspoon of this has 30 billion CFUs. And that always blows me away. A teaspoon? How does that fit? And it's because the microbes are so small.
Yeah. Well, going off on this, are there like any exciting new technologies related to the field of nutrition or the microbiome that you guys are excited about?
I'm excited about things that aren't novel. It's so cool that it's fiber and fermented food.
That's true, yeah.
Sorry. So for me, it actually, I'll let him do the really novel, cool, cutting edge stuff. I just think it's hilarious that after all the work I've done in nutrition for 30 years, the true excitement for diet is a better reason to eat fiber and fermented food. And I'm all in for all the plant-based foods that have fiber, and fermented foods taste so good. We got people joining our studies with fermented food and eating more and more, and then the study's over and we look later, they're still eating them. They like them. They just didn't know they liked them.
So I'm with Christopher. I think that probably the exciting big impact thing that's going to happen in the field is going to be something that is maybe not so revolutionary from a technology perspective, but there still are very interesting things going on with regard to technology in this field. And so an example of that is synthetic biology. So we can learn about the microbes in our gut, and we can actually gain genetic control of them. They're like little sensors in our gut because their survival relies on being able to detect all the chemical nuances in the environment and respond. We can actually rewire those circuits within the cells to take advantage of what the microbes are sensing and have the microbes execute specific tasks based on this logic. So you can have microbes in your gut that are surveying for inflammation, that are doling out anti-inflammatory drugs when they sense inflammation, and beating back disease before the person that harbors the microbe even knows that. So I think that there will be kind of this era of developing genetically modified bacteria using synthetic biology that will help us to have better health. Really excited about that.
Yeah. I'm also really looking forward to that too, because that sounds super exciting, and I feel like it has an impact on like everyone's lives too. So that's like super interesting, and obviously like back to the fundamentals: more fiber, more fermented foods. So
but the key would be if through this you could figure out which fibers from which foods or which fermented foods would be best. And this whole, the field is working toward personalized nutrition, personalized medicine. And so the microbiome is just this incredible lever that can turn things on and off. It's just untapped. So we're waiting for Justin to tap it even more.
Yeah, and touching upon like a more like personal note here, like for example, my strength and conditioning coach tells me to eat as much protein as physically possible, and she says, do not eat carbohydrates. Try to maximize your protein. And I'm like, what about like fruits and vegetables? She's like, you can eat some, but a lot of protein. So from your guys' standpoint, what do you think of that? Do you recommend that? And like, what are the implications for like your body and for the microbiome if I end up eating a lot of protein to try and get like a really toned body, a lot of muscles? So what do you guys think about that?
This is one of Christopher's favorite areas to talk about.
Do you have an hour? You should say something first because I won't be able to stop.
Okay. One of the things that I'll say is, and just to preempt Christopher's message, probably most Americans, at least, get way too much protein compared to what we need. And one of the things that's a little bit scary when it comes to the microbiome is if you're eating a lot of protein, number one, that means you're probably eating less fiber than you should. Number two, and fiber is the main thing that supports healthy microbiome function. But the other part of it is that if you exceed the capacity to absorb all the amino acids that make up the protein, those amino acids then can be metabolized by your gut microbiome in your colon. And quite often those products of metabolism are actually, it leads to problems for cardiovascular health. And so hypothesis in the field right now is that too much protein is leading to microbial production of compounds that enter our bloodstream that are actually detrimental and could cause things like heart attacks and strokes.
Wow.
Yeah, that's good. So I'll try to tone my message down. So we have recommendations for protein and fiber, and no one is getting less than their protein recommendation, but everybody's getting half their fiber recommendation. So if you're pushing protein, the way to do the best sources of protein are meat, which have no fiber, so you're sort of you're making less room in your diet for that. There isn't any room to store protein. So I think a myth that's out there is that if you'll eat a lot of protein, you'll make muscle today, and in case you don't eat enough protein tomorrow, you'll save it. You don't. At the end of the day, you turn it into carbohydrate and fat anyway. So there's not much reason to eat excess protein. It gets turned into carb and fat. And of all the physical activity people I know, Stu Phillips from McMaster University being one of the main ones, if you eat enough calories to support your workouts, you will get enough protein. It's really 90% your workout, and it's less than 10% how much protein you eat. You just have to work your butt off to get muscle and to get faster and stronger. As long as you're eating a reasonable amount of variety in your diet, you could be vegan, you could be vegetarian. I know some vegan bodybuilders who are pretty ripped, and that's all they get is plant protein. So yeah, I think the coaches have got it wrong. I'm working on busting some myths. Eat a good variety of diet, including the fiber that supports your microbiome.
Wow. So that's probably like the biggest myth of the century then. Yeah. Like, because everyone teaches you to like eat a lot of protein. Well, you can only eat so much protein. So
eating protein comes with other things.
Yeah.
And it's missing things.
Yeah, yeah.
And so part of balance, yeah. It's really not hard to get enough protein.
Definitely, yeah. And that kind of circles back to like my last question here about specialized diets. So there's like paleo diet, keto diet. What are you guys' takes on that? And if there's any diet that you would recommend that supports like the microbiome or supports a healthy lifestyle, what do you guys have to say about that?
Mediterranean. Mm-hmm. So part of it is joy and pleasure in food. So a lot of diets are very restrictive. I actually follow a vegan diet, but for a lot of people that's too restrictive. It's very restrictive with no animal sources. Fish, eggs, yogurt are all pretty good foods. Keto is super restrictive, and people can't stick to it. Paleo is quite restrictive. In my world, the best diet for you is one you can stick with forever, right? Because if you go, I don't even like the word diet, because the Americans think of diet as something you go on so that when you're done, you can go off. Yeah. And when you go off, all the things that happened before will come back. So Mediterranean is tasty. It's got a nice balance of protein and fiber. There's plenty of variety to support lots of people, and it just makes more sense. It's a nice balance of proteins, carbs, and fats. You'll get all your vitamins and minerals, and it won't be as extreme or restrictive. So that's my favorite.
Wow.
And it's hard for me to add to that. I think the one thing that I would add, just because I think a lot of people out there hear about precision diets and the need to personalize your diet, I think that probably, 80 to 90% of our problems with diet and health could be solved with like this kind of population-wide principles that we can employ: more fiber, more fermented food, healthy fats. Just, these very, very simple rules that basically nobody's adhering to right now. But I think that there are also going to be circumstances where people will need personalized aspects of diet. And the extreme example of this is if you look at like the Inuit population, they have genetically adapted to eat a high fat diet because they live in an area where there's not a lot of plants and they do eat high fat. So this is over tens of thousands of years, their human genome has adapted to a specialized diet. So there's probably, that's an extreme example that's been studied well. There's probably a little bit of that in every population that's out there, but it's a very minute part of our current dietary health challenges right now.
Wow, that's really interesting. And I've learned so much during this interview from both of you. It's honestly really insane. Like, I feel like I've walked through a portal just now. And like, I know so much more than before. So thank you so much for coming on to my interview to talk about this. And
And you should share the book.
yeah, this is, Dr.
Where you can learn a lot.
Called The Good Gut. And you should read it. It's all about the microbiome. And if you really like this interview, this book, can I say, is an extension of that.
Yeah,
So
totally.
Please check this out. And hopefully you like this video. You can like, subscribe, and comment down below what was your favorite part of the interview. And to that, we end.
Great. Thanks, Teja.
Thank you so much for coming on my interview.
That was fun.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.